from my other siblings, and you know, I describe them in my book quite intimately, and if you don't read it carefully, it can be perceived as an abusive thing, but it's an intensity that he brings that in a lot of cases brought out the best in me and turned me into kind of a person that didn't need his intensity anymore. I kind of could be more intense on myself than he ever could be. So you know, he had a vision for the game, unquestionably, in the sense that he saw it being played in a way that hadn't been played yet. You know, he was a boxer by his background. Grew up in the streets of Tehran in Iran as an Armenian, Christian Armenian. So he got in a lot of fights, and he put that to formal use, and you know, won a couple of golden gloves in boxing Olympics, a couple of Olympics. So he always kind of had an interesting perspective on engagement and rules of engagement. What I do affects what you do. So he had a vision to play the game in a different way, and that had to do with, you know, power off both sides. It had to do with taking the ball early, taking time away. You can hit the ball hard and take somebody's time away, or you can take somebody's time away by taking the ball earlier. And my dad's case, he says, why not do both? You know, take it earlier and get the shit out of it. So he did make some decisions that eventually became, you know, the foundation of my game. But he also clearly realized at 13 years old that, you know, he was overmatched with the development of, you know, strategically speaking, and, you know, sent me away from home as to not, you know, create the same dynamic he did with my siblings, which he loved me enough to let me go, and at the time it was more abandonment from my perspective, hence my rebellion with Mark Knowles at the academy. But nevertheless, it was the foundation that my game was built on. So he had this philosophy: if I hit 2,000 tennis balls a day, I'll hit 1 million tennis balls a year, and who the hell's going to beat a kid that hits 2 million, you know, millions of tennis balls, you know, a year? So it seemed to work out. One of my four, it didn't work out for the rest of my family from a tennis perspective, but it worked out with me.
A lot of us had the opportunity to read your book, which was a great book, obviously very insightful. Are you allowed to even go within 100 yards of a ball machine? How descriptive you were in the book.
Yeah. I mean, he was also ahead of his time in that respect too. I mean, tennis is a sport you can't recreate, you know, the same shots. So if you're going to work on something, it's hard to. And the ball machine is a great tool for, you know, for technique and for, you know, repetition and for working on one particular feel. And you can get kind of, you know, it turned me into a perfectionist because you kind of want to make it. You want to make those adjustments, and you want to. So I would go through that as a child over and over again, and all the different shots. And it's not something that I would advise at a certain level, but when you're learning the game, it is a powerful tool. But I definitely break out in hives if I see one.
One thing that's interesting, obviously, it's probably hard for you to come to terms with that at such a young age, kind of that mad scientist approach from your dad. Are there any life lessons that you learned kind of off the court from your dad that you've kind of taken into your life?
Well, I mean, I think we all kind of have big decisions to make as we, you know, raise children and kind of think about the things that were given to us and the things that weren't given to us. And then I think we all can fall victim to giving our kids all the things that we never had, that you might neglect giving them the things you actually did have, you know. And so I wrestled with that a lot. I mean, I think my dad taught me a lot. In a lot of cases, he taught me what I don't want to be, what I don't want for my children, you know. I mean, for me, it was always about choice. I never had it. Tennis was my life, and that's the way it was going to be. And that disconnect stayed with me, you know, throughout my childhood, which led to success as the only way for me to hopefully get out of it. And that success put me on a world stage that, you know, people started telling me who I was when I didn't even know myself who I was. So, you know, there was a huge disconnect with that choice. So what I learned from my father that I wanted to kind of implement on my children is it's not about any intensities or holding them accountable, to the things they claim they care about. It's, it's about making sure you understand what's important to them, and then make sure their days reflect what they claim is so important. And I think that's been a big learning curve, for me when I look back at my childhood, because it wasn't the work ethic that was the problem. It was doing something that I didn't want to do, something that I didn't connect to, and that I happened to be good at. And that was my demon in its original form. And so with my children, that's how I approach it. And this is, by the way, one of the most underrated, greatest athletes in the history of our sport, Mark Knowles, and when you add his incredible judgment in picking a wife, his children are off the hook too with what they can do, and I'm sure you've seen it with them, which is, you have this talent, but if you don't have the desire, the motivation, the self engagement, it's not necessarily a great experience, So I want that for my kids. I want that ownership for them to have in their own life.
You touched upon when your dad sent you away to volunteers, obviously at 13 years of age, there was a big change. Obviously we were there together with a bunch of other guys like Pilar, David Wheat, and so forth. Maybe talk a little bit about volunteers. Was it difficult? How were the changes? How did your game develop there? Did you feel that it developed there? Did you feel, in hindsight, looking back, that was definitely the right move for your dad to send you away and so forth?
It was, because it was further from him, and that's kind of, step number one, and I say that lovingly, in the sense that, he'd be the first one to tell you that, he had a habit of burning kids out, but first of all, there's a lot that happened in the academy that we're both taking to our graves, so but the environment was one that I credit a lot of my growth in tennis too. It was a dog kind of eat dog environment. The pecking order of life at the academy was how well you did on the practice court, and anytime you have that environment without a whole lot of adult supervision, you kind of got Lord of the Flies with forehand and backhand. Teenagers raising each other and coming to their own conclusions that are dodgy, to say the least. And I want it out of there every bit as bad as I want it off the ball machine. So it took on a different anxiety for me, because I was 3,000 miles away from home. You were a few hundred miles away from home. Not that I was envious of that, but you had guys like Courier who were from around the corner, would possibly go home on weekends. But for me, it was a culture shock. Vegas kid in Florida, waking up playing tennis all day, not being able to afford to go home. But once a year,
Are you saying that DeSoto Square Mall was a little different for sure? Those of you that have been to Bradenton, Florida.
Yeah, but I heard it's changed a lot. It's growing. I haven't been back since Nick fired me. So. I didn't take it personally. Don't get me wrong, but
you're clearly okay.
I actually saw Nick earlier this summer. I mean, we communicate a lot. He's a pistol, but I do love the guy, and gave him a big hug, and we reminisced a little bit. But it was definitely an environment that was designed to bring out the animal in all of us. If you wanted to improve, if you wanted to move on, because you're playing against the best in the world. So I do credit the environment a little bit more than I credit any particular coaching there.
And you mentioned Nick Military. Of course, you guys had peaks and valleys throughout your relationship, but there was a lot of positives that was derived from the relationship. Is there something that you take away from